will play in many regional orchestras and will piece those together into a full-time
yes,
career.
And just parenthetically, it seems to me that the life of the big orchestras is much better known, much more written and talked about than the life of the smaller ones, where sometimes some of the most musically interesting things can be going on. And of course, they are the source of employment for so many musicians. So I'm glad you brought that up.
And it is wonderful to see the degree of commitment and attachment to these organizations that these musicians have, even though their relationship with Orchestra X might only be 1/5 of their career, because they're probably playing in 3 other orchestras in a market area. They have a teaching studio. They're probably subbing in the big orchestra that's kind of in the middle of it, and they're probably doing wedding gigs and trying to piece it all together, and they're running around and putting lots of miles on their cars and trying to juggle these schedules, and those stresses are enormous for them. There are also stresses on the musicians in the major orchestras. Injury is significant. We have a very high, unacceptably high level of repetitive strain injury, and it's not just the string players. We also have dystonias and the brass embouchure problems. It really, I don't think there is a section in the orchestra that's not touched by that problem. And there are kind of 3 ways to deal with it. We all know about trying to get cures, surgeries and treatments, but prevention, of course, is the better way to go. There are responsibilities on the individuals, the musicians, to realize that what they're doing is actually an athletic pursuit. They need to be fit, they need to warm up, they need to understand how they're approaching their instrument. But there are responsibilities on the management, too, in terms of workload, ergonomics, proper chairs, proper sound shields. There have been leaders, and kind of a behind-the-scenes way of dealing with this problem. There was a wonderful example in the National Arts Center Orchestra led by Pinka Zuckerman, where he realized that just by reducing the number of programs per week from 4 to 3, that the number of hours preparing in the studio was decreased. So it wasn't actually a workplace change, but it was a work density change that meant fewer notes to learn and fewer hours in the woodshed, if you will.
It seems that, in fact, that this is a subject that bears a lot of thinking about, because the solutions may be simpler than anyone thinks in some ways, but just really haven't been addressed.
And I think that coming together and coming up with an international, not even national, international code of ethics and set of practices around this will be very helpful. Symphonic careers are challenging to maintain over time. Those wonderful early years when you win the big job and you're playing on the stage this repertoire that you love, over time can create problems in that there's not an awful lot of opportunity for personal growth within just the narrow realm of performing the masterworks. There are many ways that people deal with this, and many ways that we can improve the management of that. Again, this post-9/11 era that we're in has afforded many of us the opportunity to think through the experience of playing in an orchestra and finding ways that we can enhance that.
I think that the musicians in an orchestra are one of the institution's greatest artistic, creative resources, and that has been overlooked, just overlooked and minimized, because normally the orchestral musician's job is to sit there and not say anything and do what the conductor says. And if you have the world's most wonderful conductor, that might be a stimulating experience, although even with the best, it might pall over time.
Well, there is nothing to diminish the experience of having that great musical moment with a great conductor at the helm. And those evenings when everything goes right are really what we all live for as musicians.
Always that, and there's more to musical life than that.
I think that's right, and you really have touched on something. And many of the institutions are showing great energy and creativity, and I know that personally in your professional life you have been assisting many of them to explore these new horizons. As far as presentation, as far as tapping into that artistic resource, almost reinventing the concert experience.
I think so, but also I think that a musician's life in an orchestra could be reinvented. You've seen maybe Music from the Inside Out, the film about the Philadelphia orchestra musicians. So one of the things that struck me is how excited the musicians were playing some of their gigs outside the orchestra. the 2 violin players who are in a bluegrass band, the principal trombonist who plays in a salsa band. And I feel that that kind of activity, as well as just classical chamber music, might somehow be integrated into an orchestra's life.
Well, many of them do find these outlets and avenues outside of,
but
it.
see, you use the word outlet.
Yes.
So it's an outlet for something that's not happening in the orchestra. And now, I don't say that the Philadelphia Orchestra transforms itself into a salsa band, but if they have one of their principal players who loves playing in a salsa band, maybe there's some relationship between that and the orchestra.
And probably between that and the audience, too.
Between that and the audience, for sure. The audience would be thrilled to know that he does that. The audience that's an audience for the salsa band could be more interested in the orchestra if they knew that he was doing it.
I think one of the biggest developments that I am seeing, and I'm putting that in the present tense, and Eastman is a wonderful leader in this regard, is that musicians are really starting to see beyond their task on the stage and in the practice room, and are starting to understand the value and importance of the audience first and foremost, and of the people who give so generously to their organizations, and that there's a need to reach out and establish connections with them. They're learning to understand the value of the administration. And this is where I remember as a young violinist in my 20s, I didn't care what they were doing up there. I was sure it was nowhere near as glorious and important as what we were doing on the stage. Obviously, I've learned since then, and part of my task is to make sure our members learn and understand and appreciate how important that is. It
is. I teach, as you know, at Juilliard and this semester at Eastman, and I remember talking about some administrative matters in managing an orchestra to my students at Juilliard some years ago, and one of them says, "I don't care about that," he says. "All I want to do," he's a trumpet player, he says, "I want to get up and I want to play Shostakovich symphonies with a great orchestra." And my answer was really crass but really necessary. I said, "How do you think that's going to get paid for? Who's going to pay you to do that? You need this whole structure, unfortunately, or fortunately. It's a fact. You need a structure that makes it possible."
Well, that passion and enthusiasm is typical of the youthful player,
Yes,
and you would not want to in any way put a damper on that, but a respect and understanding for the role of administration. I have an interesting story. I went to a conference once where I wanted to do a panel on musician involvement in selection of the executive director, the CEO, if you will, and the music director. I just couldn't get them off the music director topic. They didn't want to talk about the CEO, but you know what? There's probably nothing more important than becoming, to your future as a professional,
who's going to run the administration,
to the sustainability of your career, as who is going to be in that leadership
And so
position.
in Philadelphia now, I understand the musicians are involved in picking Joe Kluger's successor.
As well they should be.
As well they should be. Also, another innovation that strikes me is that in Pittsburgh, though maybe this is happening elsewhere, the musicians are increasingly involved in the auditions for new players. And what strikes me in Pittsburgh, and I really kind of love this, that after somebody has proved through the early stages of the audition process that they're worth considering seriously for a job in the orchestra, now they have to hang out and play chamber music with the musicians in their section. And that's become a stage in the selection process.
And often, many orchestras are moving to actually having the candidates play a week with the orchestra. And that also is incredibly important.